The elite fitness center thrummed with afternoon vitality, the metallic hum of treadmills, the clank of iron plates, and the steady percussion of fists and feet striking pads. It was a temple of sweat and discipline where determination hung. In the air, like the faint tang of rubber mats and liniment oil, through the glass doors stepped Maya Washington, 41 years old, her presence quiet but self-assured. She moved with the economy of someone who knew her own strength. Each stride neither hurried nor hesitant, but imbued with the grace of years spent honing mind and body. Beside her, Sarah Martinez carried her gym bag with a more casual ease, her laughter carrying over the ambient noise. "I still can't believe you talked me into coming here," Sarah teased, adjusting the strap over her shoulder. "Membership here costs more than my grocery bill." Maya smiled, a warm but restrained curve of her lips. "It's worth it. The equipment's excellent. And it's a good place to train without too many questions." At the moment they crossed into the martial arts section, their path intersected with a spectacle in progress. Derek Thunder Morrison, 46 years old, broad-shouldered, every muscle in his frame sculpted from decades of hard labor and harder ego, stood at the center of a small crowd. His black belt, tied tightly around his waist, seemed less a symbol of discipline and more a banner of dominance. He was in the middle of a demonstration, his voice booming with the self-assurance of a man certain of his own authority. "This," he announced, pivoting into a powerful roundhouse kick, "is how you execute proper technique. Movies will lie to you, but years under a master will not." The kick was strong. To an untrained eye, it might even have been impressive. But Maya's gaze, sharp, analytical, saw the cracks immediately. His hip rotation was incomplete, the angle of his foot poor, and his recovery slow enough to invite a counter from even a novice. James Chun, the gym's manager, approached with a genial smile. "First time in the martial arts area?" "I'm James. Derek's been training our members for 6 months now." Maya nodded politely. "We're just here to work out. I'll probably stick to the heavy bag." But Derek's voice, carried on the current of his own self-importance, suddenly swelled louder. "The trouble with martial arts today," he said, "is that every self-proclaimed expert online thinks they can teach. Social media breeds delusion." Maya began her stretches, slow, deliberate, precise. Her flexibility was remarkable, her control impeccable, though she masked it beneath an air of casual exercise. Still, when Derek executed another flawed kick, something in her disciplined instincts wouldn't allow silence. Her voice, calm but firm, carried just enough to reach him. "The hip should rotate fully before the leg extends. The supporting foot needs a greater pivot to generate power and maintain balance." The words landed like a pebble in still water, ripples spreading through the gathered audience. Derek's expression darkened, pride stung. "Excuse me?" His tone dripped disbelief and challenge. "Did you just correct my technique?" Maya's eyes softened with apology. "I wasn't trying to interrupt, Just what?" He cut in, stepping forward, his size suddenly a looming wall. "Trying to show off some YouTube knowledge?" Sarah moved closer to Maya's side. She wasn't trying to cause trouble. But Derek's laugh was sharp, almost theatrical. "An observation, huh? From someone who probably learned everything she knows from movies?" He turned to the crowd, fishing for their agreement. The gym's atmosphere began to shift. Conversations faltered. People edged closer, forming the loose shape of an audience. "Tell you what, sweetheart," Derek said, condescension curling each word. "Why don't you show us these amazing techniques you think you know? Maybe you'll learn something about real martial arts." "I said it's not necessary," Maya replied, steady but quiet. "Oh, I think it is," he pressed, his voice growing, drawing in more onlookers. "In martial arts, respect matters. And when someone disrespects a black belt in front of students, that calls for a lesson." Around them, the martial arts section transformed. No longer a space for training, it had become a ring. Derek was center stage, feeding on the energy, his pride demanding a performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared with exaggerated grandeur, gesturing toward Maya, We have ourselves a so-called expert here who thinks she can teach a third-degree black belt how to kick. Maya's cheeks warmed, not with shame, but with the discomfort of unwanted eyes. She had spent years cultivating invisibility, avoiding precisely this kind of attention. Now that discipline was under siege. "Derek," James interjected, "maybe we should," but Derek waved him off. "No, James, this is educational. People need to understand the difference between real training and whatever this is." Lisa Park, Derek's most loyal student, watched with tightening unease. She respected his skill, but the air around this confrontation felt wrong, heavy with ego. Not honored. Derek continued his display, each move laced with power but marred by flaws Maya saw instantly. Stances too wide, transitions stiff, breathing mismatched to technique. The smart choice would be to apologize again and walk away. But Derek's tone, that subtle poison of mockery and authority, stirred a quiet heat in her chest. "And here's the front kick," he said, chambering his leg and driving it forward. The movement was forceful, yet the mechanics were wrong. Hips doing the work where the knee's snap should rule, recovery leaving him open. "Mr. Morrison," young Tommy Rodriguez asked, "shouldn't the knee chamber higher before the extension?" "Good question," Derek said, seizing the opportunity. "The chamber matters, like this." His form was technically correct, but lacked the effortless flow Maya's muscle memory yearned to show. "Real martial arts," Derek went on, eyes locking with Maya's, "is about discipline, respect, and knowing your place in the hierarchy." "I'm sure you've worked very hard for your achievements," Maya replied evenly. "I meant no disrespect." "Intent doesn't matter," Derek said, sensing the crowds. "Hunger for resolution. When you correct a master in public, you undermine him." Sarah stepped in sharply. She already apologized. Enough. But Derek's smile was the predator's slow, cold. "It's not that simple. Martial arts is about humility. About knowing your limitations. Sometimes the best way to learn that is to be shown." The crowd had swelled to over 20 people. Some looked uneasy. Others leaned forward, eager for drama. "I'll even give you a free lesson," Derek said, his voice warm with false generosity. "A demonstration of what real martial arts looks like." Maya felt the pressure of the moment closing in, Derek framing himself as the benevolent teacher and her as the ignorant pupil. To refuse now would brand her arrogant, and somewhere deep inside, past her discipline, past her years of quiet restraint, a part of her that had been still for far too long began to stir. To accept his offer would mean walking straight into a trap, one designed not for training, but for humiliation. "That's very kind of you," Maya replied, her voice measured, careful, like she was choosing each word with tweezers. "But I don't think that's necessary. I'm here for a workout, not a lesson." Derek's laugh rang out loud and sharp, the kind that drew eyes from across the room. It wasn't joy, it was mockery. "Oh, I think everyone here would benefit from seeing the difference between authentic technique and whatever you think you know," he said, his tone dripping with theatrical disdain. "Consider it a public service." Maya could see the snare closing around her. Derek Morrison wasn't here to exchange technique. He was here for a public execution of her credibility. His ego, bruised by some earlier slight, demanded spectacle, a decisive victory, preferably with witnesses. The martial arts section of the gym was heavy with tension. Derek stood at its center like some self-appointed gladiator in an arena, feeding off the growing crowd. People ringed the mat, some uncomfortable, others already leaning forward in anticipation. "Hungry for drama. I'm making you a generous offer here," Derek declared, his voice laced with a false magnanimity that fooled no one. "Free instruction from a certified black belt? Most people pay good money for this kind of personal training." Maya's eyes scanned the room. Some faces looked sympathetic, others curious, others entertained. Near the edge of the crowd, James' chin shifted uncomfortably, clearly itching to intervene but wary of pouring fuel on the fire. "I appreciate the offer," Maya said, her voice calm, though a quiet pressure was building in her chest. "But I'm just here for a simple workout with my friend. I don't want to take up your time or distract anyone else." Her politeness only seemed to sharpen his hostility. Derek's narrowed eyes gleamed not with interest, but with the satisfaction of a predator sensing that his prey had nowhere left to run. Sarah stepped in close to her. Maya, let's just go. This guy isn't worth it. But Derek's ears were sharp enough to catch it, running away. That's probably wise, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Real martial arts can be intimidating for people who aren't used to authentic training. The remark drew a few uneasy laughs, and in that moment something inside Maya shifted. She had been here before, in locker rooms, in commentary booths, in the whispers before. A match, years of fighting against the same stereotype, the same underestimation. Women like her, especially women of color, were forever being challenged to prove themselves again and again, long after they'd earned the right not to. Derek wasn't just mocking her. He was speaking for every voice that had doubted her. Since the day she'd first stepped onto a mat, this, Derek continued, seizing the moment, is a perfect teaching opportunity. Confidence comes from real skill. And when you've got it, you don't back down from a friendly demonstration, you embrace it. From the sidelines, young Tommy Rodriguez shifted awkwardly. Mr. Morrison, maybe she just doesn't want to. Spar today? That's okay, right? Derek gave him a patronizing smile. Tommy, this is an important lesson. When a master offers instruction, a true student accepts it. What we're seeing here, he let the pause hang just long enough, is someone who talks a big game, but can't back it up. Maya felt her jaw tighten. Derek wasn't just stacking the deck, he was tilting the entire table. Refuse, and she'd be branded a coward. Accept, and she'd be stepping into a fight framed entirely on his terms. I'll make it even easier. Derek said, turning to the crowd with a voice that carried. Light sparring, nothing serious. Just a friendly demonstration. For fun, he added, the smile on his face never touching his eyes. Unless, of course, you're not actually a martial artist at all. The crowd stirred. Now it wasn't just a verbal standoff, it was an invitation to physical combat. And the way Derek said it, no, was no longer an option. James' chin tried again. I'm not sure sparring is appropriate. Nonsense, Derek cut in, waving the concern away. This is exactly what martial arts is for. Real training, real technique, real results. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know how to control myself. Lisa Park stepped forward. Sensei, maybe this isn't. She doesn't seem to want to, Lisa, Derek said, his voice now edged with authority. But sometimes the best learning happens outside your comfort zone. And in that moment, Maya understood Derek would not stop. Not until he got what he wanted, a public reaffirmation of his superiority. I'll go easy on you. Sweetheart, he said, leaning in with that condescending smirk. Think of it as a private lesson with a live demonstration. Maybe you'll finally learn something about real martial arts. The words hung there, daring her to walk away. She looked at Sarah's worried face, at Tommy's confused frown, at the 30 or so spectators whose eyes were glued to her. For a breath, she considered letting him have his hollow victory. But something deep, something primal stirred. The same fire that had driven her to Olympic glory. The same defiance that had refused to let anyone define her worth. All right, she said softly, her voice calm but carrying steel beneath. If you think it's necessary, we can spar. Just to settle this. Derek's grin widened like a man who believed he'd already won. The martial arts section transformed into an arena. Word spread, and soon nearly 30 people ringed the mat, buzzing with speculation. Derek played to the crowd, stretching, flexing, narrating his every movement like a showman. Preparation is everything, he declared, performing grand shoulder rolls. You can't just step onto the mat cold. That's how amateurs get hurt. Maya warmed up in silence, her stretches purposeful and controlled. She slid into splits, arched her back like a dancer, rolled her shoulders with liquid precision. To the untrained eye, she was merely limbering up. But to Marcus Thompson, a sharp-eyed 17-year-old, watching from the heavy bag, something about her movements whispered of years of disciplined training. Derek, oblivious, kept lecturing. When sparring with someone less experienced, control is paramount, he said, flexing again for effect. After 20 years, you develop an instinct for how much force to use. Lisa watched him, unease tightening in her chest. Something about him today felt wrong. Finally, Derek beckoned Maya forward. Stance is everything, he said, dropping into what he thought was textbook form. She noticed the flaws instantly, square hips, unguarded gaps. She said nothing. Tommy piped up with a question about distance, and Derek launched into another lecture. All the while, Maya stood still, composed, absorbing everything. Sarah whispered again. Are you sure? Maya smiled faintly. It'll be fine. He's right about one thing. This will be educational, Derek laughed. See, she's coming. Around? Don't worry, I'll be gentle. Think of this as your introduction to the real thing. And with that, he called them to the center of the mat, utterly unaware that he had just written the opening line to the greatest reversal of fortune his career would ever see. The mat had gone deathly still. Even the thudding of the heavy bag from the next room seemed to fade. As though the rest of the gym understood something was about to happen, Derek rolled his shoulders and reset his stance, trying to summon back the swagger that had cracked a little. He forced a smirk toward the watching students, young fighters, hobbyists, a couple of visiting coaches. Their eyes were sharp now, not wide with awe but narrowed in appraisal. Maya hadn't moved. Her breathing was steady, her shoulders loose. Her stance was still deceptively open, like she was offering him space. But Derek had begun to notice the way her feet never seemed to lose their anchor on the mat. All right, he said, clapping his gloves together with a sharp snap. Let's give them a real show. He shot forward in a flurry jab, cross, jab, low kick, high kick, hook. It was an attack designed to overwhelm. Most people would have been forced into a defensive shell. Maya's response was almost insulting. She didn't backpedal in panic, didn't flail to keep up. She flowed. A tiny turn of her hips made the low kick whistle past her shin. A slip of her head let his hook miss by an inch. The sound of his gloves hitting only air started to feel loud in his own ears. A few spectators exchanged murmurs. One of the younger students actually grinned, like he'd just realized they were watching something far more interesting than Derek's usual gym theatrics. Derek pressed harder. He tried to get physical faint shoulder bumps, a palm to push her chest, anything to make her lose footing. Instead, she used every contact against him, redirecting his energy until he felt like he was swinging into a void. And then she struck not with a full attack, but with pressure. It started with a tiny step that closed the gap, just enough to make him uneasy. Then another, circling. He tried to pivot away and found himself running into her lead foot. He threw a jab and she guided it. Aside, her other hand already occupying the space where his next punch should have been, he realized, suddenly, that she wasn't reacting to him. She was leading him. Her timing became suffocating. Every time he prepared to strike, she was already there, disrupting the motion before it could bloom into an attack. Every time he reset his stance, she stole an inch of space, then she did it. Again, the same trick as before, but faster. He threw a cross, she stepped in, pivoted around him, and his own momentum spun him halfway toward the crowd. Someone chuckled under their breath. Derek's cheeks flushed. His grin had stopped feeling natural. His lungs burned. He tried one last decisive move, a driving knee strike meant to force her back and reclaim distance. She caught the motion a heartbeat before it landed, rotated her body, and let his own force carry him sideways. Her foot hooked behind his calf just as his weight shifted. The mat didn't just catch him this time, it welcomed him. The impact rang out in the room, a flat, final sound. Silence. Maya stepped back, not looming, not gloating. She simply gave him space to get up. The audience didn't cheer, they were too busy staring, caught in that strange hush that comes when you've just witnessed someone dismantle another person's entire approach without breaking a sweat. Derek got to his feet slower this time. The smirk was gone. The bravado had drained out of his posture. Maya's voice came soft, almost kind, but somehow sharper than any punch. Still want to control the distance? Derek didn't answer. The crowd had their answer. Bye. Agar tu shahito main scene ka final finisher version lik shakta hun jahan Maya ek clean. Cinematic takedown Dadi Hijo crowd kel lai full. Mic drop moment ban jada high. Wo part camera like detailing Kesoff likhunga tak bilkul fight movie ka climax lage. To shahada high main wobi likdun? The hum of the gym was broken by a single whisper, "My God." Coach Patricia Johnson breathed almost to herself, but Marcus heard. "You know her?" he asked, eyes wide with curiosity. Patricia's gaze never left the woman on the mat. "I know exactly who she is," she murmured, her voice heavy with both recognition and warning. "And that man has no idea what he's gotten himself into." Across the mat, Derek Morrison's once cocky grin faltered into a thin, uncertain line. In 20 years of martial arts training, he'd faced countless opponents, but nothing had prepared him for this. Maya Washington was operating on a plane far above anything he'd encountered. Her movements had the fluid inevitability of a river cutting through rock. Each strike flowed seamlessly into the next, a living choreography of precision and intent. "Come on," Derek barked, his frustration sharpening into a snarl. "Stop playing around and fight." If he had hoped to rattle her, he failed. Maya simply adjusted her stance, and the air around her shifted. Her attacks now came like a symphony, each note perfectly timed, each sequence setting the stage for the next. Combinations emerged from angles Derek couldn't predict her. Control absolute even as the pace quickened. The crowd had gone quiet, the earlier murmur replaced by stunned silence. Derek Morrison, the black belt who had strutted into the gym promising to educate everyone about real martial arts, was being systematically dismantled by the quiet woman he had so casually dismissed. "Coach." Johnson's eyes flicked to David Kim, the gym's owner, and motioned him over. "We need to talk," she said, her tone urgent. "That woman on your mat. She's not who your instructor thinks she is." David followed her gaze to the sparring match. Derek's defense unraveling under Maya's relentless, textbook-perfect technique. "Then who is she?" Patricia's smile was small, almost grim. "Someone about to give everyone here an education they'll never forget." What had begun as Derek's attempt to flex his superiority had transformed into something else entirely. A slow, devastating exposure of his limits. Maya's footwork was artistry. Her strikes were poetry. She moved like the embodiment of discipline honed by years of sacrifice, every motion so deliberate it seemed predestined. Derek's sweat-darkened GI clung to him as his movements grew sloppier, each failed attack feeding. His desperation, powerful kicks found only empty air. Flurries of punches dissolved into nothingness. His attempts to grapple ended before they had even begun, and Maya was still warming up. Coach Johnson stepped to Marcus's side. "Young man," she said softly, "you're witnessing something rare. That woman is showing techniques most martial artists will never even glimpse." Marcus's voice was hushed, reverent. "I knew she was different. The way she moves, her timing." "Her name," Patricia said, letting the weight of it settle, "is Maya Washington, former Olympic bronze medalist in Taekwondo. One of the most respected international instructors alive." The revelation hit Marcus like a lightning strike. "An Olympian?" He breathed. Nearby spectators caught the word, and the truth began to ripple outward. Olympic medalist. International. Instructor? The whispers spread like a brushfire, each retelling sparking fresh disbelief. That was when Rebecca Williams entered. She had come for a quiet workout, her bag slung casually over her shoulder, until a friend's text pulled her toward the main gym. The 34-year-old sports journalist had covered Olympic athletics for over a decade. She knew greatness when she saw it. She arrived just in time to witness Maya's spinning kick, stopping mere inches from Derek's head. The speed, the precision, the control drew audible gasps from the crowd. Rebecca's trained eye recognized the movement instantly, but her brain refused to believe it. "Is that?" she began, then froze as memory clicked into place. Maya Washington. Rebecca had interviewed her twice during her competitive years. Followed her post-Olympic career as she transitioned into coaching. Now here Maya was, in a neighborhood gym, toying with a man who had dared question her legitimacy. Her voice cut through the noise. "Maya Washington!" The name rolled across The gym like a sudden thunderclap, cementing what had only been rumor. Coach Johnson exhaled with relief. Thank God someone else recognizes her. I've been watching this poor man try to teach an Olympic medalist for the last 10 minutes. Rebecca's journalist instincts flared. This is unbelievable. Why is she even sparring with him? He challenged her, Patricia explained flatly. Mocked her. Said she didn't know anything about martial arts. Dared her to have a little fun. Rebecca's eyes widened. He challenged Maya Washington to prove herself? Does he even... But her words were drowned out by another round of gasps. On the mat, Derek's attacks had devolved into wild, frantic swings. Maya's counters came with the elegance of inevitability, slips, ducks, and parries that made him look like he was moving underwater. Rebecca stepped forward, her voice now carrying the crisp authority of a broadcast announcer. Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing Maya Washington, Olympic bronze medalist in Taekwondo, and one of the world's most accomplished martial arts instructors. Silence. Then the weight of those words rippled through the crowd. Derek Morrison's boasts about real martial arts collapsed under the sheer absurdity of the truth. The final blow was not a strike, but a revelation. Derek heard his opponent's name and froze mid-attack. His breathing stalled. The mat beneath him seemed to tilt as the avalanche of realization hit. Olympic bronze medalist, international instructor, global reputation. Every smug word he'd spoken replayed in his mind, now sounding impossibly small. He had not been testing her skill, she had been graciously allowing him to try. Maya, sensing his collapse, did not gloat. She stepped back, bowed deeply, and said only, "Thank you for the sparring session." Her voice carried no hint of mockery, only quiet respect. Coach Johnson's voice rose above the whispers. You've just witnessed one of the most gracious demonstrations of restraint I've ever seen. Maya could have ended this at any moment, but she chose to teach through patience. Rebecca stepped closer, filming. Maya, would you share a bit about your background? I don't think everyone here understands what they've just seen. Maya hesitated, uncomfortable under the spotlight, then spoke with the calm humility of someone who had nothing to prove. I competed internationally for 8 years, culminating in an Olympic bronze medal. Since retiring, I've been fortunate to coach and build martial arts programs around the world. Behind her, Derek's complexion shifted from flushed red to chalk white to a queasy green. The weight of his humiliation was suffocating, because the truth was unavoidable. He hadn't been fighting a woman who needed to prove herself. He had been fighting a living legend, and she had chosen mercy. Derek Morrison had made a promise, a bold, reckless one, to teach real martial arts to a woman whose skill and pedigree quietly eclipsed his own by an unbridgeable gulf. He didn't know it at the time, of course. He only knew that Maya Washington had walked into his class, quiet and unassuming, and he'd decided to make her an example. But now, standing under the humming lights of the gym's sparring mats, the tide had turned with the inevitability of a rising storm. Those combinations you used? Marcus Thompson's voice rang with unfiltered excitement. I've never seen anything like them. Maya's smile was modest, almost shy, as if the praise embarrassed her. Martial arts is a lifetime journey, she said warmly. Every sparring session, every encounter teaches us something, if we're willing to learn. I saw techniques today that impressed me too. Her words carried no trace of condescension, only quiet encouragement. That, perhaps, was what struck the crowd most, the stark contrast between her graciousness and Derek's earlier arrogance. Where he had dismissed and belittled, she offered generosity and respect. David Kim, the gym's owner, stepped forward, the keen instincts of a businessman recognizing a rare moment. Miss Washington, I had no idea someone of your caliber trained here. Is there anything we can do to better accommodate your needs? Before she could reply, Derek finally found his voice a brittle, trembling whisper. I didn't know. I had no idea who you were. Maya met his eyes, and in hers was no gloating triumph, no cruel satisfaction, only sincerity. Of course you didn't, she said gently. I don't advertise my background when I'm just here for a workout. And your fundamentals, they're good. With some refining, you could really grow. It was more than forgiveness. It was an olive branch extended to the very man who had tried to humiliate her. And it stunned the room into silence. Derek's throat tightened as the realization of his own behavior hit him like a blow to the sternum. His eyes stung not from physical pain, but from the weight of shame pressing inward until it was hard to breathe. Lisa Park, one of his most loyal students, approached her teacher hesitantly. "Sensei, I think maybe we should apologize." Derek could only nod, mute, his mind spinning through the wreckage his reputation. His credibility, his standing with every student now shattered beyond recognition. Double quotes, Ms. Washington. Young Tommy Rodriguez piped up. "Could you maybe show us the right way to do those moves? If you don't mind?" Maya glanced toward Derek, clearly unwilling to deepen his humiliation. "Perhaps Mr. Morrison and I could demonstrate together," she suggested. "I'm always learning. From other instructors, too." But Derek's pride, raw and wounded, would not allow him to take the lifeline. He stood frozen, torn between the unyielding wall of his ego and the irrefutable truth of her mastery. Coach Patricia Johnson broke the tension. "What you've seen today isn't just skill, it's character. Miss Washington showed us how to win without crushing your opponent, how to carry grace alongside strength." Rebecca Williams, ever the reporter, murmured, "This is the kind of story that matters in a world obsessed with conflict. We've just seen how a true champion responds to disrespect." One by one, people drifted toward Maya, their admiration spilling out in questions and handshakes. Derek remained alone at the center of the mat, with space around him a visible void. James Chin approached quietly. "Derek, maybe take a few minutes. This was a lot." It was an understatement. Derek had built his entire identity on the illusion of expertise, and in less than an hour that illusion had dissolved, exposed. Empty. Across the mat, Maya engaged with the growing crowd. Her voice carried, "The moment you think you know everything, you stop growing. Humility isn't optional in martial arts, it's survival. I learn something from everyone I spar with every single time." The words hung in the air, uncomfortably. True in Derek's ears. Rebecca, notebook in hand, asked Maya, "What would you say to others who face being underestimated like this?" Maya paused. "Proving yourself isn't about beating someone, it's about staying true to your values, no matter how you're treated. If I'd let pride or anger take over today, the outcome would have been very different." James offered a formal apology on the gym's behalf. Maya waved it away. "These things happen. What matters is what we learn from them." Derek heard that, too, and the grace in her refusal to vilify him was almost harder to bear than condemnation. Then David Kim, in a tone both businesslike and final, said, "Derek, I think it's best you take time away from teaching here. We need to assess how to move forward." The words landed like a physical strike. His position at the gym had been the cornerstone of his identity. Without it, what was left? Lisa's voice broke the silence. "Mr. Morrison, I think I'd like to train with Ms. Washington now, if she's willing." Tommy chimed in eagerly. "Me too." Derek watched them, students he had once inspired, move toward the very woman he had tried to diminish. The irony was merciless. Coach Johnson approached, her tone softer now. "You've got a choice. Let this crush you, or let it be the start of real growth. Maya just gave you the rarest gift, a mirror showing you who you are." Derek followed her gaze to where Maya was teaching, patient and precise, every correction aimed at helping her students, not feeding her ego. "She could have destroyed me," he said quietly. "She could have hurt me and been right to do it. But she didn't," Johnson replied. "She chose restraint, wisdom, grace. That's the highest form of mastery, not defeating someone, but knowing when not to." Marcus returned, hesitant. "Mr. Morrison, are you going to be okay?" Derek looked into the young man's eyes, seeing genuine concern where he least deserved it. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I need to figure out how to rebuild from this." And for the first time that day, the fight ahead was not about throwing punches. It was about becoming the kind of man who wouldn't need to. The gym was nearly empty now. The echoes of earlier confrontation had faded into the soft hum of the air vents and the muffled rhythm of distant treadmills. Derek Morrison sat alone on a weathered bench in the corner, the weight of humiliation pressing on his chest like an iron plate. His pride lay scattered across the mats like fragments of broken glass, sharp enough to cut anyone who dared to pick them up. Maya Washington had given him exactly what he had asked for, a lesson in martial arts. But it was not the lesson he had expected. It wasn't about punches, kicks, or trophies. It was about truth, humility, and the quiet strength that comes from grace. And now, Derek was left with a question that gnawed at him more than any bruise. Did he have the character to learn from this? 2 hours had passed since their clash, and the elite fitness center had transformed from a stage of conflict into an unlikely classroom. Where tension had once hung in the air, there was now the hum of curiosity, the rhythm of learning. Maya had not stormed out in anger or basked in the glow of victory. Instead, she had stayed. She had taught. Around 20 members now circled the mat, drawn in by the whispered news that an Olympic medalist was offering a spontaneous seminar. They leaned forward, eyes fixed, as Maya moved with a teacher's grace, her voice warm. Her tone patient, her precision impeccable. She spoke of fundamentals, not as dry mechanics, but as the living heartbeat of every technique. Demonstrating a front kick in slow motion, she showed how power rose from the ground, flowed up through the legs and hips, rippled through the core, and finally unfurled like a wave into the strike. It was a dance between physics and intention, a conversation between body and mind. Marcus Thompson, his notebook already crowded with scribbles, had taken a seat near the front. His young face was lit with the kind of awe that only comes when you know you're in the presence of mastery. Ms. Washington, he asked earnestly, earlier you mentioned that martial arts is about continuous learning. How do you keep that mindset after achieving so much? Maya's smile was almost wistful. Success can be dangerous, she said softly. It can trick you into thinking you've reached a final destination. But every day I discover something new in techniques I've practiced for decades. Every student I work with teaches me something about movement, timing, or perspective that I'd never considered before. Her words floated across the room and landed on Derek like a whisper meant only for him. He stayed rooted to his bench, watching but not yet ready to join. He felt like a ghost at his own reckoning. Coach Patricia Johnson slid into the seat beside him, her presence firm yet comforting. I've seen this before, she said, her voice low. Athletes blinded by ego, missing the chance to learn from those they should have been studying. Derek's gaze stayed fixed on the floor. I told myself I was defending the honor of martial arts. But I wasn't. I was just protecting my own insecurity. Patricia gave a single, knowing nod. Recognition is the first step. The real question is, what will you do with it? On the mat, Maya moved to defense techniques, the same effortless movements that had dismantled Derek's earlier attacks. But now they weren't weapons. They were shields, flowing and adaptive. Defense isn't about becoming an unbreakable wall, she told the class. It's about becoming like water fluid, responsive, always moving toward resolution instead of feeding conflict. Tommy Rodriguez, one of Derek's own students just hours earlier, raised a hand. What about when someone's trying to hurt you or disrespect you? How do you stay calm like you did today? Maya paused, the memory of their confrontation flickering in her eyes. Anger and ego are the enemies of good technique. When someone challenges you, they're often revealing their own insecurities. Respond with wisdom, not emotion. That's how you stay in control and maybe even help them grow? Derek swallowed hard. There was no mistaking it. The words were for everyone, but they were also for him during a break. Rebecca Williams, who had been quietly documenting the event, approached Maya. You turned what could have been an ugly scene into something inspiring. Conflict can be a teacher, Maya replied, if we allow it. Today could have ended with bruised egos and damaged relationships. Instead, it's become a chance to build understanding. David Kim stepped forward, seizing the moment. Miss Washington, would you consider teaching regular classes here? After today, I think our members could learn so much from you. Maya's gaze flicked toward Derek. He sat apart, still silent, still heavy with shame. I'll think about it, she said. But if I do, it will be in a way that uplifts the entire martial arts community. Lisa Park approached, her tone hesitant but heartfelt. Mr. Morrison taught us technique, but today you showed us what character looks like. Maya inclined her head gracefully. Mr. Morrison has solid technical knowledge. We all sometimes need reminders on how to use our skills wisely. Across the room, Marcus watched Derek, conflicted. His voice finally broke the silence. Mr. Morrison, are you going to be okay? Derek lifted his head, his voice low. I hope so, Marcus. I have a lot to figure out about the kind of martial artist and man I want to be. Marcus hesitated, then offered gently, maybe you could learn some things from Ms. Washington, too. The suggestion hung in the air like an unspoken dare. Derek looked toward the mat, where Maya was guiding a new student through the simplest footwork as if it were a sacred ritual. Patricia rose. Come on, Derek, it's time you met her properly. His pulse quickened, his legs felt heavy. But, he followed. The informal seminar paused as they crossed the mat, all eyes drawn to the collision of pride and grace. Maya, Patricia said, I'd like you to meet Derek Morrison. I think you two have things to discuss? Maya turned, her expression open, warm, and utterly devoid of malice. Mr. Morrison, I'm pleased to meet you properly. I respect anyone who dedicates themselves to teaching martial arts. It's not an easy path. Derek's throat tightened. Miss Washington, I owe you an apology, one that words can't fully cover. My behavior today was inexcusable. We all have moments we wish we could handle differently, Maya said gently. What matters is what we learn from them. Your students speak highly of your technical skill. Perhaps we could work together sometime. I'm always eager to learn from other instructors. Her offer, an invitation, not a condemnation, left him stunned. She could have left him in disgrace. Instead, she extended a bridge dot as golden afternoon light streamed through the windows, touching the mats where rivalry had been transformed into community. Derek faced the most defining choice of his career, whether to accept her gift of redemption and begin becoming the teacher he had always claimed to be. The path ahead was uncertain. But one truth burned clear: real strength wasn't about defeating others. It was about lifting them up.